This story is titled, Overheard My Fiancée Tell Her Friend. He has no clue I've been siphoning $400 weekly from his trust fund into my secret account. After 5 years, I've saved $104,000. Perfect for leaving this clueless idiot. She even showed screenshots of our joint finances. I said nothing, still made her favorite breakfast. Today her phone blew up with my 65 missed. Hey everyone, I'm a 31-year-old architectural engineer living in Boston with my wife Catherine Kate, as I've always called her. We've been married for 8 years, and everything seemed perfect until now. It's funny how nightmares like this don't start with dramatic fights or finding lipstick on your collar like in the movies. No, my world came crashing down because of something so mundane. A Windows update that crashed Kate's MacBook's bootcamp partition. It was a Saturday morning around 7:45 a.m. Kate asked me to fix her laptop before she went for her morning run. Nothing unusual about that. I've always been the tech person in our relationship. So there I was, alone in our home office, running diagnostics on our computer. I'm not the type to snoop through someone else's stuff, especially not my wife's. Our 8-year marriage was built on trust, or so I thought. While I was working on her laptop, her Outlook pinged with a new email notification. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the subject line caught my eye immediately. Final divorce strategy, account documentation attached. My stomach dropped like an elevator with snapped cables. I should have closed it. I should have pretended I never saw it. My mouse hovered over the notification, and before I could stop myself, I clicked it. The email was from someone named Patricia Weiss, ESQ. A lawyer, obviously. The timestamp showed 7:44 a.m., literally 1 minute before Kate had handed me her laptop and conveniently gone for a run right after. The message itself was short, but absolutely devastating. Kate, I've received the account statements you forwarded. The accumulation of $156,000 over 6 years without your husband's knowledge establishes a strong starting position. I've reviewed the weekly transfer records and everything appears properly documented. We'll discuss further at our Monday appointment. Below is Kate's original email, the one that's now burned into my brain forever. Patricia, as discussed, I've been transferring $500 each week from the joint account funded by his inheritance into my hidden savings at First Republic. He has no idea. After 6 years, I've accumulated $156,000, enough to start a new life without that pathetic loser. I've attached statements showing the systematic transfers and current balance. I plan to leave May 15th while he's at his friend Marcus's for their stupid monthly poker night. I'll take only what's mine plus this account. You said this approach keeps everything clean and legal since we've commingled assets, right? There were PDFs attached, our bank statements and statements from an account I'd never seen before. My grandfather had died 6 years ago and left me $650,000. Everything he had. Kate and I had been married for 2 years at that point. I loved her and trusted her completely. When she suggested putting the inheritance in a joint account because we were partners in everything, I agreed without hesitation. And she had been siphoning it off since day one. $500 every week like clockwork. Small enough that I wouldn't notice among our regular expenses, always on Tuesdays when I was tied up in back-to-back meetings. It was the perfect crime happening right under my nose for 6 whole years. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like someone had hollowed out my chest with a rusty spoon. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely scroll through the statement PDFs. May 15th. That was in just 3 weeks. She had been planning this for God knows how long, and all this time, I'd been bringing her coffee in bed every morning like a complete fool. I'm not usually confrontational, never have been. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. The initial shock transformed into a cold, calculating anger unlike anything I've ever felt before. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself. Then, I carefully closed the email, marked it as unread, and continued fixing her laptop as if nothing had happened. When Kate came back all sweaty and cheerful from her run, she smiled at me. I told her I had fixed the issue. She thanked me with a kiss on the cheek. The same lips that had called me a pathetic loser in that email were now offering to make me breakfast. Want some avocado toast? She asked. Sure, I replied, somehow keeping my voice steady. Sounds great. The next 48 hours were the hardest of my life. I moved through our house like a ghost, pretending everything was normal while my mind kept racing through what she had done. $500 times 52 weeks times 6 years equaled $156,000 stolen from me. She was planning to leave in 3 weeks, had been consulting with a divorce lawyer for who knows how long, and had called me a pathetic loser to said lawyer. This was my inheritance, money my grandfather had worked his whole life for. I brought her coffee Sunday morning like always. We watched Netflix together Sunday night. I went to work Monday like everything was fine, all while feeling like I was going to vomit or scream or both. At 11:42 p.m. on Monday night, after making sure Kate was asleep, I called Marcus from the garage. He's been my best friend since college and the only person I trusted right now. Dude, she's been stealing from you for 6 years, Marcus said, as shocked as I was when I told him everything. That's some next-level betrayal. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm not confronting her until I have a plan. Marcus agreed with my approach. Document everything, he advised. Talk to a lawyer before she knows you know. And whatever you do, don't let her realize you've seen that email. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the garage for almost an hour, just staring at the wall. The engine of my life had thrown a rod, and I was still trying to process the damage. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Kate's purse while she was in the shower. I found a First Republic bank card I'd never seen before and took photos of both sides. Then I checked her phone. She'd always used my fingerprint to unlock it, in case of emergencies, and, interestingly, had never changed that setting even as she was planning to leave me. I found the banking app and took screenshots of everything, then carefully put it all back exactly as I had found it. The balance matched the email exactly, $156,000 and change. My money? My grandfather's money. The man who raised me after my parents' accident, who worked 60-hour weeks at the factory until he was 72, who never bought himself anything nice so he could leave something for me. And she had been stealing it, week by week, for 6 years. I wrote this all down from my office at work. I couldn't focus on anything that day. I kept checking my phone, making sure the screenshots were still there, like they might magically disappear if I didn't keep confirming their existence. A plan was forming in my head. I wasn't going to confront her yet. She thought she had 3 more weeks before she would spring this on me, which meant I had 3 weeks to prepare my response. Marcus texted me his divorce attorney's name, and I scheduled an appointment for the next day at lunch. Around 2 p.m., Kate texted me asking if I wanted chicken or fish for dinner, like she wasn't planning to burn our life to the ground in a few weeks. I texted back, chicken sounds great, because what else could I say? I'd been running the numbers all day. If she had taken $156,000 over 6 years, that left slightly over $490,000 of my inheritance that she hadn't managed to steal yet, plus whatever we'd managed to save together. I needed to protect what was left before she cleaned out everything. When I got home that evening, Kate was cooking dinner like nothing was wrong. The kitchen was filled with the smell of garlic and herbs, and she was humming along to some Spotify playlist. 6 years of lies and theft, and she was just humming. I sat at the kitchen island, typing notes on my phone while she moved around the kitchen. Every few minutes she would glance at me, a little furrow forming between her eyebrows. I realized I'd been quieter than normal, too deep in my own thoughts. Is everything okay, babe? She asked, her head tilted to one side. You seem different. I smiled and told her I was just tired from work, but I could tell she was suspicious. The same woman who'd been stealing from me for 6 years could somehow still tell when something was off with my mood. I didn't know how I was going to make it through the next 3 weeks without completely losing it, but I was determined to try. Because when I finally responded to what she'd done, I wanted it to be perfect. The chicken sizzled in the pan, Kate hummed, and I sat there planning. 2 weeks passed since my discovery. I was still living in this weird twilight zone, making small talk over dinner while secretly documenting everything, watching Netflix beside her while my brain cataloged 6 years of unexplained absences and suspicious behavior. It was like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. The day after my discovery, I met Marcus for lunch at this dive bar downtown where Kate would never show up. The place had sticky floors and smelled like old beer, but the burgers were amazing, and more importantly, it was safe to talk there. I showed Marcus all the screenshots I'd gathered. His face went through a whole journey from disbelief to anger to cold calculation I'd never seen on him before. Bro, I always thought Kate was a bit extra, he said through a mouthful of fries. But this is some next-level snake behavior. You need to go full scorched earth. We spent 2 hours mapping out what Marcus called Operation Frost. Apparently, I was going to freeze her plans or something. He's been watching too many spy movies. Step 1. Protect the remaining inheritance money, about $490K. Step 2. Gather more evidence. Step 3. Find my own place. Step 4. Line up a good lawyer. Step 5. Execute the plan before her May 15th deadline. It seemed simple on paper, but way harder in practice when you're trying not to tip off the person sleeping next to you every night. At 2:17 a.m. that night, after Kate fell asleep, I did something I'm not proud of. I used her fingerprint to unlock her phone while she was passed out. The guilt lasted about 4 seconds before I remembered she'd been stealing from me for 6 years. What I found made the email look tame. There were hundreds of texts with her friend Lisa discussing her exit strategy. They'd been planning this for over a year. Kate referred to our marriage as her prison sentence, and me as her ball and chain. Nice, right? But that wasn't even the worst part. I found emails. So many emails. Kate hadn't just been hiding money. She'd been hiding an entire life. Weekend work conferences were actually girls' trips to Miami. Late nights at the office were spent at hotels with some dude named Charles. Seriously, Charles? I found credit card statements showing restaurant charges in towns she supposedly never visited. My entire marriage had been a carefully constructed lie. I barely slept that night. At 6:45 a.m., I dragged myself out of bed and made Kate coffee like nothing was wrong. I watched her sip it while scrolling through Instagram, occasionally showing me random reels like we were still a normal couple. When she left for her spin class, I called the bank. Turns out you can't just remove someone from a joint account without their signature. The lady on the phone sounded genuinely sympathetic, but rules are rules. I'd need Kate's consent to separate our finances, so I went with Plan B. I opened a new account at a completely different bank and calculated exactly how much of my remaining inheritance was still in our joint account. $487,250. That afternoon, while Kate was supposedly getting her nails done, or so she claimed, I transferred $480,000 to my new account. I left just enough in the joint account so she wouldn't immediately notice anything off when she checked it. It felt like defusing a bomb underwater while wearing oven mitts. Every notification ding from my phone made me flinch, as I was expecting Kate to call screaming about the transfer. But nothing happened. Step 1 was complete. The next few days became a bizarre dance of normalcy and secret planning. On Tuesday, I met with a divorce attorney, not the one Marcus recommended, but a woman named Nancy that I found through online reviews. She's this no-nonsense lady in her 50s who called Kate's actions textbook financial infidelity. She asked if I wanted to go for the jugular or just get out clean. I chose jugular. By Friday, I had found an apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom in a decent part of town with a month-to-month lease. I paid the security deposit in cash. Each night after Kate fell asleep, I would sneak small batches of important documents and irreplaceable items out to my car, then to a storage unit I had rented. My grandfather's watch, old photo albums, an external hard drive with all my data, anything I couldn't bear to lose. I'd had 2 close calls so far. The first was when Kate came home early from brunch last weekend and caught me putting a box in my trunk. I told her it was just old stuff for Goodwill. She seemed satisfied, but gave me this weird look before going inside. The second close call happened when my new bank sent a welcome email that popped up while my phone was sitting on the coffee table. Kate was literally 3 feet away. I've never lunged for anything faster in my life. I played it off like it was a spam notification, but I'm pretty sure I pulled a muscle. The real breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Kate's mom, Barbara. She stopped by unannounced last Sunday to drop off some planter boxes she'd found on sale. Kate was in the shower, so Barbara and I made awkward small talk in the kitchen while I pretended her daughter wasn't planning to rob me blind. "So nice that Kate found that cute condo," Barbara said, rearranging magnets on our fridge. The virtual tour she showed me looked lovely. Those floor-to-ceiling windows worth every penny of that deposit, I'm sure. My brain short-circuited. Condo deposit? I managed to keep my face neutral while making appropriate noises of agreement. Barbara kept chatting, completely oblivious to the bomb she had just dropped, until Kate came downstairs in her bathrobe and shooed her mom into the living room. That night, I checked Kate's emails again. Sure enough, buried in a folder labeled Tax Docs 2020 inches, who would ever look there, were emails about a $155,000 deposit on a luxury condo downtown. The closing date was May 16th, the day after she planned to leave. This wasn't just an exit plan. This was a whole new life she'd been building in secret, funded by my inheritance. The rage I felt in that moment was like nothing I've ever experienced. Not hot and explosive, but cold and focused, like liquid nitrogen. I had to go sit in the backyard at 1 a.m. just to breathe without screaming. For the past week, I'd been executing the final phases of Operation Frost. I set up automatic payments for all personal expenses through my new bank account and started redirecting my paychecks to the new account, which would take effect with the next pay period. I took detailed photos of everything valuable in our house, with timestamps, and backed up every shred of evidence to 3 separate places. I also started casually mentioning the upcoming poker night to reinforce the idea that I'd be gone on May 15th. The hardest part had been acting normal. Kate had been extra affectionate lately, bringing me coffee some mornings, suggesting date nights, even initiating sex more often. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was falling in love with me all over again. But I did know better. This was the behavior of someone trying to avoid suspicion, classic guilty conscience, overcompensation. Or maybe she was just trying to make sure I didn't change my poker night plans. Either way, it was too late. Yesterday at 3:19 p.m., the final piece fell into place. My lawyer called to confirm that all the paperwork was ready, evidence was documented, financials were protected, and my new place was secured. Kate had no idea that I knew everything. She had no clue that in less than a week, her entire plan was going to implode spectacularly. She still brought up little future plans sometimes, a summer trip we'd never take, a restaurant we should try next month. And I would just nod and smile. Last night, she asked if I was excited about poker night next week. She said she might go see a movie while I was out. I said something non-committal while my heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. But she just kissed my cheek and went back to scrolling through TikTok, completely oblivious to what was coming. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. This morning I woke up at 4:30 a.m. I couldn't sleep. The weight of what was about to happen kept pressing on my chest until I had to get up. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the dark, watching the sunrise through the window. This house we bought together, these cups we picked out at Target, this life we built, all of it built on lies and theft. Kate was still sleeping peacefully upstairs, completely unaware that in exactly 5 days, everything would change. The timer was counting down. The pieces were in position. And when May 15th arrived, I wouldn't be at Marcus's for poker. I'd be right here, waiting for her to realize that I'd known everything all along. It's done. That's the weirdest part to process. After weeks of planning, sleepless nights, and acting like everything was normal while my stomach was in knots, it's finally over. I've been staring at my phone for the past hour, watching Kate's desperate texts and calls flood in. The current count is 79 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 17 voicemails. I've listened to exactly none of them. May 15th arrived. D-Day, Operation Frost, whatever you want to call it. The morning started bizarrely normal. I woke up at 5:32 a.m. according to my Fitbit, though I hadn't really slept much anyway. Kate was still asleep, her face peaceful, like she didn't have plans to blow up our entire life later that day. I made coffee and scrolled through the final checklist on my notes app. Final bank transfers complete, all important docs secured, lawyer on standby, new place ready, evidence organized. Kate came downstairs around 7:15 a.m. looking surprisingly nervous. She started chattering about random things, the weather, some TikTok she saw, how the garbage disposal was making that weird noise again. She kept asking what time I was heading to Marcus's. I smiled and said probably around 6 p.m. At 8:03 a.m., she kissed me goodbye, said she had errands to run, and left in her Toyota. The second her car pulled away, I checked the tracking app I'd installed on her phone. Not proud of this, but desperate times call for desperate measures. She went straight to her hidden condo, probably preparing it for her big move later. This gave me exactly the window I needed. Step 1. Money moves. I had already transferred most of my inheritance, but there was still about $7,000 in our joint checking account that was legitimately mine from my last paycheck. I transferred that to my new account, leaving only Kate's last deposit from her job. I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine, just making sure she couldn't take anything that wasn't hers. Step 2. I drove to our bank with all my documentation. The manager, a guy named Richard with a terrible comb-over, looked increasingly uncomfortable as I explained the situation and showed him the evidence. He couldn't do much officially without Kate present, but he did put a note on the account requiring both signatures for any withdrawals over $1,000, just enough to prevent her from draining whatever was left when she realized her plan was falling apart. Step 3. I texted Marcus at 10:17 a.m. It's happening today. You ready? His response, let's freeze her world, bro. Dramatic? Yes. Satisfying? Also yes. At 11:45 a.m., Kate texted, asking if I wanted her to pick up dinner since I'd be home late from poker. The casual audacity of planning my dinner while simultaneously planning to leave me forever was impressive in a sociopathic way. I replied with a thumbs up emoji. I went home and waited. According to the tracking app, Kate was at the mall, probably buying stuff for her new condo. By 3:30 p.m., she was heading home. This was it, the moment everything would change. I sat at our kitchen table with a manila folder containing screenshots of her emails to her lawyer, bank statements showing her $156,000 hidden account, photos of her condo paperwork, screenshots of her text with Lisa about our prison sentence marriage, and the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. The front door opened at 4:03 p.m. Kate walked in carrying Target bags and Starbucks, looking slightly flustered. She froze when she saw me sitting there, clearly not expecting me to be home. Her first words were, "Why aren't you at work?" I calmly explained that I'd taken the afternoon off to prepare for poker night. She relaxed visibly, putting down her bags, and asked if I wanted some of her Starbucks cake pop. I said no thanks, I'd already eaten. Then I asked her very casually how the condo was looking. The change in her face was like watching a system crash in real time. First confusion, then panic, then this weird attempt at recovery where she tried to laugh it off, asking what condo I was talking about. I slid the folder across the table. What followed was the most surreal 37 minutes of my life. Kate went through every stage of crisis management. First, denial. "What are you talking about?" Then, gaslighting. "You're clearly confused about these documents." Next, minimizing. "It was just some money for emergencies," followed by blame shifting. "If you hadn't been so controlling with money," then anger. "You went through my private emails," attempted bargaining. "We can work this out, I'll put the money back." Move to threats. "You'll regret this. My lawyer will destroy you." Finally, tears, complete with mascara trails and hyperventilating. I just sat there, oddly calm, watching the performance 8 years of marriage dissolving in less than an hour. When she finally ran out of tactics, there was this weird silence where we just stared at each other like strangers. Then I told her everything I knew. The weekly transfers, the secret condo, the pathetic loser comments, her plans for May 15th, her weekend work trips that were actually spent with friends or some dude named Charles, and 6 years of systematic theft and lies, all laid out in chronological order. Her face went through a fascinating transformation. First, she looked shocked that I knew so much. Then this weird smile appeared, like she still thought she could salvage something from this train wreck. She started talking about couples therapy, about second chances, about how she'd made a terrible mistake but still loved me. It was like watching someone try to use a CVS receipt as a parachute after jumping from a plane. I slid the divorce papers across the table and stood up. The look on her face when I told her I'd already moved most of my stuff out? Priceless. Even better was when I explained that I'd moved the remaining inheritance money to an account she couldn't access. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent 6 years building a plan that had just collapsed in 20 minutes. She started yelling then about how I couldn't just take our money, about how she'd contributed to our marriage in other ways, about how I'd never make it without her. I picked up my keys and walked toward the door, telling her she had until the end of the month to figure out her living situation, but that I wouldn't be staying there anymore. The house was half hers, after all. I'm not a monster. As I reached the door, she played her final card. Tears and apologies, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and that she'd do anything to fix this. 6 years. $156,000. Countless lies. I just shook my head and walked out. By 6:30 p.m., I was at Marcus's place with pizza and beer, giving him a play-by-play of what had happened. His girlfriend Olivia kept saying, "Oh my God," between bites of pepperoni, while Marcus alternated between calling Kate creative names and asking practical questions about my next steps. That's when my phone started blowing up. The first text from Kate came at 7:14 p.m. "Where are you? We need to talk about this." The second text arrived at 7:16 p.m. "Please come home, I can explain everything." The third text at 7:22 p.m. "You can't just walk away from 8 years." Then the calls started, one after another after another. I put my phone on silent and turned it face down on Marcus's coffee table. We played actual poker instead of just pretending to, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Around midnight, I checked my phone. 79 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 17 voicemails. I stayed at Marcus's that night, sleeping on his couch. I woke up to 23 more missed calls. This morning, I went to my new apartment. It's small, the kitchen sink drips, but it's mine. No lies, no theft, no pretending. I picked up breakfast at Dunkin' and ate it sitting on my still-boxed mattress while scrolling through all the messages. Kate's mom called around noon. I actually answered that one. Barbara was confused and upset, saying Kate was absolutely beside herself and not making any sense. I calmly explained what her daughter had done. There was a long silence on the other end that told me everything I needed to know about whether Barbara had been involved. Finally, she just said, "Oh, Derek," and hung up. By 2 p.m., texts from our mutual friends started coming in. Most were confused. Some took Kate's side without hearing mine. A few asked for my version before judging. I sent the same response to everyone. Ask Kate to show you her secret bank account with $156,000 of my inheritance money. I haven't heard back from those people yet. Funny how that works. It's 7:35 p.m. now. I'm sitting in my new place, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. The emotion hasn't fully hit me yet. I'm still operating in this weird, efficient survival mode where practical matters are drowning out feelings. Kate's latest tactic is having her lawyer send threatening emails about marital assets and financial disclosure. My lawyer says it's just bluster. The documentation I have of her systematic theft is pretty damning. The $156,000 is still in her account. I didn't try to take it back. That would have complicated things legally. But the remaining $487,000 is secure. In the grand scheme of things, I paid $156,000 to discover who she really was. An expensive lesson, but at least I didn't lose everything. I changed all our passwords, including Netflix, Hulu, etc. The look on her face when she realized I'd changed the Netflix password was probably worth at least $14.99. And no, I didn't hack her accounts. She used the same password for everything. Our anniversary date plus her childhood dog's name. Not exactly Fort Knox level security. Edit at 9:42 p.m. Kate just texted that she's outside my new apartment. No idea how she found this place. I'm not answering the door. This is exactly why I told only 2 people my new address. Update on the edit at 10:13 p.m. She left after 20 minutes of knocking and texting. I just ordered a Ring doorbell on Amazon. It should be here tomorrow. It's been a month since my world imploded. The divorce is proceeding. Kate eventually moved into her secret condo, and our house is on the market. Most of our friends have chosen sides, with the split being about what you'd expect. Last week, I ran into Kate at Target of all places. We stood in the home goods aisle staring at each other like we were from different planets. She looked smaller somehow. After an awkward minute, she just asked if I was doing okay. I said I was fine and asked about her. She said she'd been better. Then we both just walked away. 8 years reduced to an awkward Target encounter. The thing is, I don't feel burning hatred anymore. Don't get me wrong, I'll never forgive what she did, but the rage has faded into something quieter, something like relief. Sometimes at night, I still wake up reaching for someone who isn't there. Old habits die hard. But then I remember everything, and I'm grateful for the empty space beside me. My grandfather used to say that some lessons cost more than others. This one cost me $156,000 in 8 years. But as I sit here in my own place, answering to no one and planning a future that's entirely mine, I think I got a bargain.